Jungkook, you never understood me. Jimin shouted. His face was red. His eyes were glazed. You're not my brother anymore. Those words froze the atmosphere. Jungkook, usually known for his cheerful smile and calmness, stood still, staring at his best friend with blank eyes. The cold studio floor seemed to seep into his body, spreading a piercing tension. In the crowd of dumbfounded BTS members, no one could say a word. The atmosphere that was supposed to be warm and full of laughter has now turned into a painful battle of silence. Every member felt the tension, but no one dared to move, let alone speak. Jungkook stepped forward, his voice low but full of hidden emotion. You only see what you want to see, Jimin. You never care about how I feel, do you? Jimin was silent. Their eyes met in an eerie silence. Suddenly, Jimin lowered his head, tightly squeezing the already trembling hand. I never asked for this, Jungkook. I just want you to understand me. However, there was no reply from Jungkook. He just looked at her with a sharper gaze than usual, as if there was something darker behind those words. As part of BTS, they have always been known for their strong brotherly ties, but this time it all fell apart in an instant. What really happened between the two? What makes a friendship that has been established for so long fall apart in an instant? BTS, a legendary group known for their close friendships and harmonious relationships, was suddenly hit by an unexpected storm. Since then, nothing has been the same. Conflicts hidden during this time began to unfold to the surface. Over time, this quarrel enveloped more than just the relationship between two best friends. It affected the entire group, and the impact was much greater than one could imagine. Each BTS member is caught in an insoluble dilemma. Will they stand on the side of one, or try to reunite what's already broken? Jungkook and Jimin have been best friends since they first joined BTS. The trust, sacrifice, and love they share have been the foundation of their relationship. However, over the past few months, tensions have begun to emerge. Jimin feels that Jungkook is drifting further away, as if focusing more on his solo career than their relationship. On the other hand, Jungkook feels trapped in Jimin's shadow, as if every step he takes is being compared to his best friend. This incomprehension creates an inevitable emotional distance point. One night, after a big show, when they all return to the hotel, Jimin and Jungkook get caught up in an argument that leads to an emotional outburst. Each blames the other, with burning anger and confusion. No one could control the words thrown out, and it all felt like the shattering of a hard-to-fix mirror. However, this is not just about ordinary disputes. There is much more hidden behind the quarrel. Secrets that have never been revealed. Feelings that are stored for too long. A past trauma that begins to haunt them both. Have you ever felt like I sacrificed myself for everything when no one understood? Jungkook's voice sounded hoarse, yet full of emotions that almost exploded. He stood at the end of the corridor, his back straight even though his whole body felt crushed. Jimin stood at the other end of the corridor, their eyes met with inexplicable intensity, as if each was trying to find an answer in each other's faces. But there is only a growing emptiness that permeates, adding to the widening distance between them. Both of them still feel trapped in the past that cannot be released. This time, however, they are dealing not only with each other, but also with forgotten and neglected parts of themselves, feelings that have long been hidden, that can no longer be controlled. What do you want, Jimin? Jungkook asked, his voice trembling, full of confusion and unspoken pain. Do you want me to be like I used to be, when we were just two people sharing everything? Do you want me to sacrifice myself once again? Jimin looked at Jungkook with reddened eyes, holding back the tears that were about to fall. I just want us to go back to being what we were, like when we first started it all together. But it turns out that's not possible anymore, is it? Jungkook shook his head quickly, blankly staring at Jimin as if he were trying to escape reality. Things have changed, Jim. I don't know who I'm dealing with right now. This second episode delves deeper into the root of the problem that has been kept silent. As Jungkook and Jimin try to find answers for each other, they become further entangled in a never-ending confusion. Every word that is thrown, the more tension that has been formed. The two friends, who once understood each other with just one glance, are now like two strangers trapped in a completely different world. What happened in their friendship? What caused the two of them to change so drastically, to doubt each other's existence? However, the problem is not only their differences. There is something bigger involved, something darker that is beginning to surface, forcing the two to confront other sides of their previously hidden selves. Something that has been hidden from the public for too long, and now threatens to destroy everything. Jimin, who has always been known for his attentive and adaptable nature, now feels a deep loss. Since Jungkook started taking more focus for solo projects, Jimin felt that he was getting marginalized. However, there is something more to it, something much more personal. Jungkook, on the other hand, feels constrained in their relationship. From the beginning, he always considered Jimin to be a part of him, but lately, that feeling has begun to change. He felt that he could no longer be himself without being constantly overshadowed by the shadow of his best friend. However, this conflict is more than just hurt or incomprehension. There is a great secret hidden, which concerns their past, which has never been revealed. There are feelings that are more complex, darker, and much harder to deal with than they think. After the altercation, Jungkook and Jimin tried to avoid each other, each caught up in his own thoughts. However, the two cannot escape the shadows of the past that continue to haunt them. Beyond their personal conflicts, the rest of BTS began to feel a marked change in the group's dynamics. There were those who tried to reconcile, but there were also those who simply kept silent, trapped in fear of a widening rift. The atmosphere in the rehearsal room was quiet and empty. There was only a faint piano clanging sound from the large speakers in the corner of the room. Jimin sat in the corner, hands clasped on his chest, his face down, looking far away, even though his body was there. Jungkook stood in front of the mirror, looking at himself as if he were trying to recognize a figure that had changed so drastically. "Jungkook, we need to talk." Jimin's voice finally broke. Though he knew the words would lead to something even more painful, Jungkook turned his head slowly, his face illegible, yet something faded in his dark eyes. Without answering, he nodded, giving a sign for Jimin to continue. "I know you're mad at me," Jimin began, but his voice stuck. "But I don't know what we're fighting for anymore. You're getting away, and I just want us to go back to the way we were." Jungkook twisted his body, his steps heavy. "You know, Jimin," he said in a low but resounding voice, "we always try to go back in time, but that past will never be there again. It is just an illusion that we create to mask reality." Jimin lifted his head, his eyes began to turn red. "But we can fix it. I don't want to lose you, Jungkook." Jungkook let out a long sigh, looking at Jimin with an increasingly sharp blank look. "You've lost me, Jimin," he replied in a barely audible voice. "You just don't want to admit it." After the meeting, there was a silence that gripped BTS. No one can get close to Jimin or Jungkook, as each seems trapped in their own world. The two are like shadows of each other, but can no longer reach each other. Each word thrown out only further deepened the invisible abyss. Meanwhile, the other members, such as Taeyoon, Jin, and RM, feel that something is wrong, but don't know how to deal with it. However, this episode brings something more than just an argument between two best friends. There was something deeper emerging, a feeling that could perhaps be explained as fear or regret that was increasingly difficult to express. Something that happened long before this problem came to the surface. Jimin felt increasingly alienated, even though his body was in the crowd. He often wakes up at night, his eyes staring blankly at the dark sky, thinking about how their friendship could have just been ruined. They once shared everything, overcame difficulties together. But now, he feels like he doesn't know Jungkook anymore. On the other hand, Jungkook is also caught in his own confusion. Every time he thought about Jimin, a feeling of anxiety came over him. Why does he feel trapped? Why does their relationship seem to be fading? All those questions swirled endlessly, affecting his every step. However, what bothers Jungkook more is not just the feeling of alienation with Jimin. There is something greater, a truth that should never be hidden, a secret that can no longer be left buried. Something connected to their past, something that made him feel more distant from the friend he once thought of as his brother. One night, after a performance abroad, Jungkook could no longer contain his curiosity. He decides to look for answers, chasing the trail that has long been left behind. He discovers something shocking: a letter left in their room, a letter written by someone they trusted, but who turns out to have betrayed them without them knowing. "Jimin," Jungkook whispered to himself, "what's really going on?" Episode 4. The Shadow. Jungkook can't sleep. The sound of the clock ticking in his room felt louder than usual, as if time itself was demanding an answer. The letter he found last night was lying on his bedside table, still wrapped in an envelope that had been slightly damaged. He looked at the letter blankly, as if he was afraid to open the long-locked door. However, inside him, there was a feeling that pushed him to find the truth. Even though it would tear apart everything he believed in. As morning crept in, Jungkook finally opened the letter. The writing looks fast, rushed, and there are ink stains that interfere with some words. However, one sentence at the end of the letter hit him hard. Jungkook felt his whole body freeze. Those words were like a hard blow. What does "this is best for you" mean? Why does a person feel the need to write those words to himself? What has been going on behind the scenes that they have all closed tightly? Without thinking, Jungkook immediately looked for Jimin. His heart was pounding, and his mind was filled with fear of what he would encounter. This episode opens up more layers of conflict hidden behind Jungkook and Jimin's friendship. The deepening alienation is not just about their personal feelings, but also something bigger that threatens to reveal all the dark secrets inside BTS. A truth buried for years, which, if discovered, could destroy everything. Jungkook, now on the edge of emotional collapse, tries to find out what really happened, including to Jimin, the best friend he has always trusted. When Jungkook arrived at Jimin's place, he found his best friend standing on the balcony, staring at the setting sun. Jimin seemed wrapped in a strange silence, different from usual. "Jimin," Jungkook called, his voice trembling. Jimin turned his head slowly, his normally bright eyes now looking more faded, as if he had lost something very important. "What is it, Kook?" Jimin asked, his voice flat, as if trying to cover up the emotions that were shaking him. Jungkook stepped forward, the letter now firmly held in his hand. "What is this?" he asked, showing the letter to Jimin. "What do these words mean?" Jimin fell silent, his face turning tense. "Jungkook," he seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if his words were stuck in his throat. "I already know when everything will end. But I don't want you to know." Jungkook stared at Jimin intently, searching for the answer hidden in his best friend's gaze. "What are you hiding, Jimin?" Suddenly, Jimin looked stunned, his body trembling lightly. "I am." Jimin sighed heavily, as if those words were getting harder to say. "There are many things we cannot change, Jungkook. Sometimes, the people we trust are the ones who hide the most from us." Jungkook's eyes widened, confusion and anger mixed together. "Who's hiding something from me, Jimin?" His voice grew louder, breaking the tense silence. "Who?" Jimin shifted his gaze, staring blankly ahead. "You can't fix it, Kook. Not now, not again." Jungkook ran out from the balcony, his pace quick, like a rushing shadow leaving a space filled with his confusion. The letter was still in his hand, as if it were the key to open the door that had been locked tightly within him, a door that was now slightly open, displaying greater doubt than he could have imagined. Jimin didn't follow her, and it hurt more than anything that could be said. The room in the hotel was getting cramped, and the air seemed stifling. Jungkook threw the letter on the table, then sat down in a window seat, staring at the empty street. Outside, the busy city didn't know what was going on in its heart, and it felt more terrible than anything. He knew, in his mind, there was one question he couldn't answer. What happened between me and Jimin? Meanwhile, outside the room, Jimin stood in front of the door, immersed in a smothering silence. His face looked like it was burdened by something greater than mere regret. There is a secret he cannot reveal, a truth forgotten by time, but which continues to pursue him. And now, Jungkook has shaken it all. This episode delves deeper into the pent-up tension between Jungkook and Jimin. As hidden secrets begin to be revealed, they realize that there is a darker and more distant truth than what they imagined. The secret is not just about them, but about BTS, about all of them. When the past and the future meet, the two must choose: face a devastating reality, or remain trapped in an ever greater lie. Jungkook didn't know where to step. She grabbed her phone with trembling hands, trying to contact Taeyong. However, before his fingers even had time to touch the screen, an incoming call from the genie appeared on the screen. He picked it up without thinking, even though he knew it might not be the right time. "Jungkook, what happened?" Jin's voice sounded firm but full of worry. "We're all worried about you two. What really happened between you and Jimin?" Jungkook was silent, his mouth feeling dry. There was much he wanted to say, but the words seemed unable to come out. We're trying to solve something, Hyung. A lot of things happened." Jin sighed on the other end of the phone. "You know, Jungkook, we're all not just BTS members. We're more than that. We're brothers. If anything interferes with your relationship, it will affect all of us." Don't let this get any more complicated. Jungkook stared at the letter again, then turned his gaze out the window, trying to calm his increasingly chaotic mind. I know, Hyung. I'll try. However, even though those words sounded hopeful, Jungkook knew that in order to repair what had been destroyed, they would have to face more than just a personal quarrel. There was something bigger that had been hidden by someone they trusted so much. On the other hand, Jimin tried to calm himself down by practicing, trying to distract from the chaos inside him. However, the exercise felt futile. Every move he made, every dance he tried, seemed to be hampered by an increasingly heavy burden on his chest. He knew that something had changed between him and Jungkook, but he also felt like there was something deeper affecting them. A few weeks ago, he overheard a suspicious conversation, something his ears should never have heard. A secret conversation involving someone they consider a friend. It was the beginning of everything, the starting point of everything that now overshadows them. Jimin didn't know how to deal with it. He knew he couldn't just walk away and let everything unravel. But inside him, there was a growing fear, a fear of the truth that might be much more painful than he imagined. Jimin sat quietly in a chair, staring blankly at the wall of the room that looked increasingly gloomy. The monotonous ticking of the clock becomes the background for the feeling of emptiness that fills the chest. Her phone vibrated on the table, but she didn't pick it up. His heart was pounding so fast. It was as if his whole body was shaking from the pressure that had not abated. He knew who was calling, Jungkook. For some reason, he was afraid to answer. Meanwhile, Jungkook was outside, walking aimlessly with his phone in hand, trying to feel the cold air through his skin. An overwhelming sense of loneliness enveloped him. He knew there was something missing, something bigger than just their argument. There is a mystery surrounding the two of them, and now, Jungkook feels as if he is stepping on a path of no return. As he paused in a small garden, his phone vibrated again. This time, he chose to lift it. Jungkook, Jin's voice sounded worried. You really need to talk to Jimin. It's been a long time coming. What happened between you two? Jungkook bit his lip. I don't know where to start. Hyung, there's something bigger we're hiding. Something that might destroy everything. Jungkook, you know we're not just colleagues. We're brothers. There's nothing we can deal with if we face this together. Don't let the truth take it all away. However, Jin's words seemed unable to break through the thick wall formed between him and Jimin. Jungkook knew that he had to face it, but for some reason, the more he tried to get closer, the bigger the chasm created between them. In the midst of his confusion, Jungkook and Jimin are each trapped in their own worlds. Although they love each other as best friends, there is something darker that prevents them from being able to see each other clearly. A long-buried secret, a long-broken trust. Jimin tried to find the answer in himself. When she remembers that conversation, one she heard clearly some time ago, she knows that the secret isn't just about her and Jungkook. There's a lot more to hide from someone they trust, and it's not just going to destroy their relationship, but BTS as a whole. Jimin sat in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection of himself, who looked much more tired and wrinkled than usual. What should he do? Does he have to reveal everything to Jungkook? Or does he have to hide the fact that it might be more painful than what they have already experienced? However, a clear answer did not come. Instead, what comes is a deepening fear. On the other hand, Jungkook kept thinking about the letter. He had read the letter over and over again, but the more he tried to digest the words, the more difficult it was for him to understand. Who wrote this letter? Why was the letter in his hand? What does it mean for him and Jimin? Suddenly, a strong feeling prompted him to go to a place he had never imagined before. To a place full of memories, the place where it all began. The place that will bring everything to the pinnacle of truth. The cold of the night was biting Jungkook's skin as he stared at Jimin from a distance. There was something so pressing, which made the night air feel even heavier. There was only the sound of the wind rustling quietly and the clink of a clock that counted the time. So close, but they are separated by such a deep abyss. Jimin stood with a face full of confusion and sadness, as if the words to be spoken could destroy everything. What are you hiding, Jim? Jungkook finally broke the silence. His voice was hoarse, barely audible, but strong enough to awaken Jimin. Jimin closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath before finally looking at Jungkook with a heavy gaze. I want to tell you, Jungkook, but there's too much I have to explain. Me? I don't know where to start. Jungkook felt something vibrating inside him. Fear and anxiety began to invade his heart. He knew that what Jimin would say next was not something that could be easily accepted, but he is at the end of this road. There's no turning back. I can't go on like this, Jimin. Not after everything that happened. I need to know. I deserve to know. Jimin bit his lower lip, and as if forced to speak, he finally raised his face. Do you remember the letter you found? Jungkook nodded slowly. The letter, not just for you. That's for me too, but I'm scared. Jimin's voice trembled. Suddenly, the surrounding atmosphere felt increasingly tense. There was a growing tension, and Jungkook felt his heart beating faster and faster. What do you mean? Jungkook asked, voice full of tension. What are you afraid of, Jimin? Jimin did not immediately respond. He seemed to be overwhelmed by something greater than he could express. His usual cheerful eyes now seemed empty, trapped in the shadows of the past that continued to haunt him. I'm not just keeping a secret, Jungkook, Jimin said softly, as if it were too hard to reveal. I was hiding the truth about us, about our true feelings. Jungkook felt as if the world stopped spinning. Something inside him just seemed to collapse. He looked at Jimin in deep confusion. Our feelings? What do you mean? Jimin sighed, as if those words sliced his heart. We are both trapped in feelings that we cannot express. It's not just me and you, Jungkook. There are many greater things which we will never understand. The truth about our relationship, about what goes on behind the scenes of BTS. Everything is already too complicated. Jungkook fell silent, as if accepting a reality that was too hard to accept. He began to feel that their friendship, even more than that, their relationship as brothers, had been tested by something much stronger than they could face. Jimin, what really happened? What have you been hiding from me all this time? Jungkook's voice trembled, a mixture of anger, confusion, and fear. If we don't talk now, I'm afraid we'll lose everything. Jimin turned his face away, as if afraid to see Jungkook's reaction. I don't want to destroy you, Jungkook. But this secret, bigger than both of us. There are other people involved. People who might destroy BTS if we're not careful. Jungkook felt the tension rising. He no longer knew if he was ready to accept the reality that had just been revealed. His fear grows bigger, and he feels that there is a dark force lurking behind the secrets brought by Jimin. Behind the walls of eerie silence, a long-buried secret is revealed. Not only between Jungkook and Jimin, but also BTS, the family they built with blood, sweat, and tears. A truth that not only changes both of them, but can destroy everything. The night was getting darker, and the tension between them was getting thicker. The two of them stood in silence, surrounded by the shadows of the past trapped in their every step. Jungkook looked at Jimin with a look full of confusion, but also a deep sense of loss. He felt like he was dealing with two different worlds. On the one hand, there was Jimin, whom he had known for years, his brother, his best friend, but on the other, there was a dark side that was revealed through Jimin's words. Everything that happened during this time, all their togetherness, turned out to be built on a secret so big, which they could not even face together. What should we do now? Jungkook asked in a deep voice. Jimin stared at the ground, as if he didn't know how to step. I want to be with you, Jungkook. But I know we can't escape this truth. If we continue to hide this, we will be destroyed. The night sky looked darker than usual, as if reflecting the waves of feelings raging inside Jungkook. A cold wind blew, whispering through the cracks of the open windows of the rehearsal room, carrying with it the smell of rain that was about to fall. Inside the room, there were only two figures who seemed to be caught in a complex of feelings, Jungkook and Jimin. They stood face to face, their eyes locked, but no words came out of their lips. Only the tension solidifies more and more in the air. Jimin took his eyes off Jungkook, trying to hold back the tears that had almost fallen. Jungkook, we can't go on like this. We can't keep hiding from reality, he said hoarsely, as if something was pressing against his throat. Jungkook felt as if the world around him was spinning very fast. What he had always thought of as their friendship, was suddenly caught in a darkness he couldn't comprehend. He wanted to scream, but the words seemed to stop in his throat. Everything Jimin said was true. They had turned a blind eye to this fact, and now the truth was lurking around them, ready to roll it all up. Jimin, Jungkook's voice interrupted, trying to muster up the courage. What have you been hiding all this time? You said we couldn't go on like this, but why are you talking now? Jimin looked down, as if to avoid Jungkook's sharp gaze. I can't do it, Jungkook. I can't see you getting any deeper. It's not just about the two of us. There's something much bigger, darker that threatens it all. Jungkook was getting more and more confused, but his heart was already beginning to feel even greater uneasiness. Something went wrong, and he felt like a witness trapped in a game he never understood. What do you mean by something bigger, Jimin? What the hell is going on? Jimin lifted his head, his eyes filled with deep sadness. I never wanted this to happen, but there are people who control everything. Someone is hiding a bigger secret from us, from BTS. Jimin's words struck like lightning that split the night sky. Jungkook felt as if the world around him collapsed instantly. Are you serious? Who controls us? Who caught us in this lie? He asked in a voice that began to tremble. Jimin sighed, his face full of despair. Someone we never expected. Someone who has always been close to us, whom we trust. But now it's too late. This truth will destroy everything. There are no words Jungkook can say. Out there, BTS is at the peak of their popularity, but they don't know that behind the splendor, there is something much bigger, a secret that could end their career instantly. Jungkook felt trapped in an ever deeper vortex, and he knew there was no easy way out. In the midst of the silence, there was a knock on the door that made both of them silent. Jimin and Jungkook stared at each other, as if they didn't know what to do. What do we do now, Jungkook? Jimin asked in a confused tone. Jungkook stared at the door, his heart racing. There's no other way, Jim. We have to deal with this now, before it's too late. The door opened slowly, and a figure appeared in the doorway. A BTS member whom they had always considered their close friend. His face was flat, yet there was something very suspicious in his gaze. You guys, you two already know, he said softly, almost in a whisper, but clearly enough for both of them to hear. Jungkook and Jimin looked at each other. At that moment, they knew that the truth they had been hiding had finally been revealed, and they have to be ready for whatever comes after. What Jimin has been hiding all this time is not just a little secret. It's not just about their feelings, but there is something much darker, which is ready to destroy not only their friendship, but also the future of BTS. When that door opens, everything will change. A secret that has never been revealed will eventually be revealed, and nothing can stop it. As the figure stepped in, Jungkook and Jimin fell silent. No words were spoken, just a look full of tension. That figure, whom they had always believed in, now looked like an enemy ready to take them down. You know, said the figure again, this time in a more resolute voice. You cannot continue to fight this reality. Jungkook stood in front of a large mirror, his eyes staring blankly at his reflection. His mind was in turmoil, unable to focus. His rapid heartbeat seemed to get heavier and heavier, pulsing along with every knock on the muffled room door. A new reality hit him so hard, even harder than before. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to calm himself. However, at that very moment a voice from outside stopped all his thoughts. Jungkook, Jimin's voice sounded quiet, but forceful. We have to talk. Those words reminded her of last night, when they were both talking to someone they had trusted all along. Someone who has revealed a truth that is more terrifying than what they imagined. Something they can't handle easily. Without saying anything, Jungkook opened the door. There stood Jimin with a face that looked even more tired than before, as if the world they knew had just been destroyed. What are we doing, Jimin? Jungkook asked hoarsely, full of tension. Jimin took a deep breath. We can't run away anymore, Jungkook. It's too late. They walked towards the rehearsal room, a place that had been witness to their unwavering friendship. However, now the place felt unfamiliar, filled with an inexplicable sense of anxiety. As soon as they sat down, Jimin looked at Jungkook with a frightened look. Who are they, Jimin? Jungkook asked, his eyes full of tension. Who controls everything? What is their purpose? Jimin was silent for a moment, trying to collect the long-buried words. They are part of a big system that wants to control us, BTS, he replied in a heavy voice. They are behind the scenes, managing everything, from big decisions to the little things we take for granted. Jungkook felt cold. But why do we know now? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Jimin looked down, his eyes unable to look directly at Jungkook. Because I'm scared, Jungkook. I'm afraid of what will happen if we dismantle everything. They will destroy us. We will lose not only a career, but much more. They will destroy everything. Jungkook felt a feeling of tightness in his chest. We can't hide forever, Jimin, he said firmly, though his heart began to waver. We have to face this, whatever the consequences. At that moment, the door of the training room opened loudly, and a figure they already knew well entered, Namjoon. His face looked serious, and his eyes were full of tension. Jungkook, Jimin, we have to talk. Everyone in the room could feel the tension seeping through. The calm atmosphere is now becoming more and more tense. Namjoon stood in the middle of the room, with a louder expression than usual. There's something you should know, something you didn't expect. Jimin stood up, looking confused. What do you mean, Namjoon? What else are you hiding? Namjoon let out a long sigh and looked towards Jimin first. I have to tell you, everyone, we can't keep hiding. You already know some of it, Jimin, but you don't know all of it. Jungkook stood up, trying to control himself despite the curiosity and fear seething inside him. What do you mean? What exactly happened? He asked, almost in a whisper. Namjoon stepped closer and looked directly into Jungkook's eyes. You've seen some of the truth, but by now, you should know that it's not just us who are involved. There are more people out there watching our every move. People we've always considered friends. Jimin squeezed his hand firmly. His expression began to change. So it's true? All this time we were just pawns in their game? Jimin asked, a disappointed voice that was so clear. Namjoon nodded slowly. We've all been used, Jimin. And now, we are in a very dangerous position. Before Jungkook could respond, a loud knock on the door silenced the three. The door opened quickly, and an unexpected figure entered, Seokjin, with a face that looked anxious and a little hasty. You don't know everything, Seokjin said in a hoarse voice. There is something bigger than what we think, something that could end us all. Tension grew in the air. Jungkook and Jimin looked at each other, confusion and unspoken anxiety in their eyes. What really happened? Jungkook asked, finally unable to hold back his curiosity anymore. Seokjin approached and looked at the two of them seriously. You have entered a very dangerous game, and if we don't move fast, everything will be destroyed. The friendship they had been building was now in danger of being destroyed. What's really going on behind the scenes? Who controls them? And what will happen to BTS if they can't fight the great powers that threaten their future? The episode reveals that a greater conflict awaits them, and they must choose to survive or let go of everything. Jungkook and Jimin now know that they are not only fighting an enemy from the outside, but also dealing with forces they did not expect. Their friendship is tested with a secret that is darker than they imagined. They may not trust each other as much as they used to. However, on the other hand, they also have to deal with the fact that if they do not move now, they will lose more than just a career. That morning, the world of BTS felt different. There was no longer the usual laughter heard in their training room, no more passion flowing in their every move. Everything felt empty, like the wind blowing a breeze without direction. Behind the curtain of fame and the spotlight of the cameras, they are now caught in a vortex of dark truth. Jungkook stood on the balcony, watching the gray sky, occasionally breathing in the fresh air that brought a little peace. However, his mind was still filled with doubts. Jimin, who was sitting not far from her, looked at her with a look that was difficult to explain. Something had changed between them, something they couldn't fix with just words. Suddenly, the sound of a door opening loudly broke the silence. Seokjin entered with a quick step, his expression full of anxiety. We don't have any more time, he said in a firm tone that sounded louder than usual. Jungkook turned around, his eyes normally filled with joy now filled with confusion and despair. What do you mean, Jin? He asked, although his voice sounded a little tired. Jimin, Seekjin continued as he looked at his best friend with a serious look. Do you realize that we only have one chance to stop all of this? Everything we know, everything we believe, it's all an illusion. We don't know who really controls everything. Jimin was silent, his hands clasped tightly. I know, Jean. I already know. But do we still have a choice? Can we stop this without destroying everything? Jimin's words hung in the air, leaving a heavy burden on everyone's hearts. However, the answer came very quickly. No more choice, said Namjoon, who suddenly appeared in the doorway, his face looking older than it should be. We must act now, or we will lose more than we can imagine. Jungkook and Jimin looked at each other. They know that this turning point is the last test for them. Will they continue to walk together, or will these differences destroy their friendship forever? They all moved towards the boardroom, a place they used to discuss big decisions. However, this time the atmosphere was completely different. Every step was heavy, full of questions with no answers. The tension intensified as the boardroom door closed violently. Seekjin stared at the big screen in front of them. There, an unwanted message appears. They know. That's all it says on the screen. A message that makes the tension creep throughout the room. Who knows? Jimin asked, his voice hoarse and full of tension. There are outsiders watching us, Namjoon replied with a serious face. The people we've always considered friends, they have much greater power than we thought. Jungkook felt his chest tightness. What do they want from us? That's what we're looking for, Seekjin replied. But we don't have much time. They know we're starting to dig deep, and they're coming to stop us. All eyes were on Jungkook and Jimin. They both know that their friendship has been tested in ways they have never imagined. And although they tried to survive, doubts and fears gnawed at them even more. When they decided to fight, everything felt like an endless battle. However, for the first time, Jungkook felt something different. He felt alienated from everyone, even from Jimin. The decisions they will make will not only affect BTS, but also their future as individuals. We can't let this continue, Jimin said, his voice softer than before, but still full of firmness. If we don't fight back, we will lose ourselves.